There you go. Take it away, Eunisses. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all the coalitions and organizations that put this event together. I am incredibly honored to, be moderating this panel between two candidates that, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but like, as soon as I met them, like early on, I was like, these are the ones. I was like, Kenneth's passion for transparency, accountability with the money, made him one of the people that we early on as an organization, as a person, like we endorsed because we felt that he would make an incredible impact. And as well as Faisal, meeting him early on as well. We're talking about, the issues around harm reduction, the issues around housing, and even cannabis policy, and him being willing to talk about the issues in present day, not, about on issues and with the lens of like the war on drugs and, lens that are not going to move us forward. So I'm grateful to be here with them and can't wait for you all to hear about them. And when he says she, her, hers, council member elect for the first district, and I'm sorry if you hear squeaky toys, that's all my dogs fighting over a ball right now. But I want to pass it to Faisal first. Faisal, can you just take a quick minute to give a little bit of background on yourself? The role of the city attorney is one that is not very known by a lot of people. Like they don't know what the responsibility is, what the power is. So can you just take a minute to talk about yourself and a little bit about the actual role of the city attorney? And then Kenneth, we'll pass it on to you.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much, Eunisses, for being here. Thank you for all the coalition for hosting this. This is a great event. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Faisal Gill. I am a criminal defense and a civil rights attorney. I've been a criminal defense and a civil rights attorney for over 20 years. I've done everything from take on the city attorney's office and won in police brutality cases and use of force cases, as well as employment discrimination, and you name it, I've done it. The city attorney's office is a very important office. It has three very distinct roles. One, and most importantly, in my opinion, which affects the people, is it has all the misdemeanors that occur in the city of Los Angeles under its jurisdiction, which is the majority of crime that takes place in Los Angeles. So the city attorney decides what the policy of that is. Next, the city attorney advises the city council, all the departments, and the mayor on what is the law, what is legal, what is not legal. And we've seen this become important all throughout the last year or so. In fact, just yesterday, we had a city council hearing where it was very important. And then lastly, the city attorney has to defend any lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles, and more importantly, the city attorney can file affirmative lawsuits against corporations who are in wage theft or environmental violations, landlords who are not abiding by what we want to do, and go after a company. So the city attorney is a very, very powerful position, and I can't wait to get in the office and actually work for the people for the first time.
Thank you, Faisal. And just to highlight, team, real quick, how does that look like in practice? Well, in 2015, most of my work has been around criminal justice reform, drug policy, harm reduction. And in 2015, I approached the current city attorney's office to implement a diversion program that would allow people, instead of getting arrested for a certain list of offenses, that LAPD could hand them over to a case manager so that they can get their most immediate needs met. But the city attorney refused to implement it. And so that's an example of the power that the city attorney has. They decide whether we can implement diversion programs, move forward with, instead of just relying on the jails, because it's not only the district attorney, it's not only Gascon, the city attorney, LAPD also sent a lot of people into our county criminal justice system. And the last piece I want to uplift about the power is, I'm not sure if y'all have seen the article that just came out around tenant harassment. And literally, because the city attorney suggested one word, they have not been able to actually implement the tenant harassment policy. So instead of saying the attorneys shall be paid, it says the attorneys may be paid. And so, we shouldn't be relying on just the city attorney to make those decisions, but that's the kind of power they have, where within one word of the city attorney suggesting, with one word suggestion, literally thousands and thousands of tenants don't get access to the protections that the council is moving forward. So I just wanted to list like real life examples of that position. And Kenneth, I'll pass it to you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and the role of the city controller? I don't know if anybody knows what that is. I didn't know it until you ran for it. So please share with us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Councilmember-elect Hernandez, for having me. I'm I'm so excited to be here talking to you all. I'm so excited that we won first place, got 240,000 votes, more than Rick Caruso for mayor. And we are doing something that is so exciting. Like, I hope you all can feel it in my voice because I'm excited. And no one has ever thought about the city controller race before. We have high schoolers involved. We have college students, like people who wouldn't even think like thought accounting was fun. But it's city controller is essentially the city's accountant and auditor. We're in charge of making sure that city employees are paid, that we're making payments to vendors. We're also in charge of our financial systems and just making information transparent. Another big role of the city controller is the city's auditor, not only on our finances, but also doing performance audits, making sure that our tax dollars are going to use. We can audit departments and we can audit programs or functions of these departments to make sure that what we're paying, since we pay a lot of money, are actually being used efficiently and effectively. And, you know, it's like what Council Member like Hernandez said, you know, with the tenant anti-harassment ordinance, what we saw is the LA Housing Department, they did not have enough money to protect tenants or to have enforcers to hold these landlords accountable. And that's something that the controller, you know, could be proactive about and be like, hey, we noticed that we are trying to protect tenants, but there's no funding for that. The LA Housing Department's underfunded. And so, you know, the controller is a very powerful position. Sadly, 90% of the population don't know about it. And I think our campaign is really doing a good job in making it known and making information more accessible. We've created resources and, you know, hopefully we have our first certified public accountant be the city's accountant. And, you know, we're hoping we can help Faisal and council members like Eunisses Hernandez be successful in office too.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Faisal. So we have a series of questions. We'll save a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. So just think about what you might want to ask. But, you know, both positions also serve somewhat of a watchdog or independent role, providing advice and oversight to the city council and the city or the mayor generally. Why is it important that we have progressive folks in these watchdog positions? Kenneth, we'll start with you.
Great question. You know, it's important to have someone who is a progressive, who is qualified, who understands the role and understands how it impacts people. You know, the controller can help the council or the mayor by providing information that has not been known before. You know, for example, when they were passing ordinances around 4118 around homelessness, no one knew the impact of what that would do. And as you've seen Ron Galprin's websites, he puts out information and data, and we put out information and data on the impact of what these policies could do. And we found out that, you know, these anti-homeless ordinance 4118 would have made it made homelessness basically illegal in certain districts by like 50%. Which is in CD1, where a council member like Hernandez is. And what we saw was that people on the council were using our analysis. Like we were featured on the LA Times, on the New York Times, and it's like, Kenneth Mejia, a campaign, and it's like, we're not even in office. But as you could see here, we're providing data in a way that's easy to understand, in a way that is urgent and it's fast and it meets the moment. And so I think that's the reason why you should have a progressive and a qualified person in there, because we can really see to it that the people's needs are met and in a way that's you know, easy to understand and accessible. I think you're on mute, Eunisses.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth. Faisal, why do you think it's important that we have progressive folks in these roles, especially in the city attorney role that has so much power, you know, over people's homes, over people's bodily autonomy, over just so much?
Absolutely. Look, I think it's very important to have a progressive city attorney for many, many reasons. And we've seen in 4118, we've seen in the Echo Park raid, we've seen in the other raids on homeless encampments. The legal advice that's provided to the city council and the mayor is important. And the person who's providing it is extremely important. You know, is what's going on legal or not? I've said from day one that 4118 was unconstitutional. This morning's LA Times had a case again about the Ninth Circuit, where they reaffirmed the Boise decision, basically saying it was an Oregon case, but they reaffirmed it and they said that if the beds are not available, you cannot remove houseless people from the streets. So the city attorney giving that advice is extremely important. As Councilman Hernandez, you pointed out, and I love saying that, by the way, it's so awesome to say Councilman-elect Hernandez. It's great. As you pointed out, that just one word can change everything. And we've got the rent moratorium coming up. Now it's going to be in February. So what's the city attorney going to be saying on affordable housing, SB 9? What's the city attorney going to be saying? Are we going to be able to build more affordable housing? Are we not going to be able to build more affordable housing? What's that going to look like? And then for the city attorney, biggest role is misdemeanors. Are we going to have more of the same and basically just lock people up and then give them criminal records unnecessarily? Or are we actually going to try something new and actually, reach public safety? Kenneth is doing a great job as a he is doing a great job as a controller right now, even though he's not in office. But all the research, all the audits, the information that he finds out from those audits, you need to have a progressive city attorney to take action after the information is found out, to say, okay, look, this is what we can do and we can't do. If you don't have one, none of that's going to happen.
That's spot on. And I would like to just build off that before we get into some other questions around police accountability. But this piece is really important of what you just mentioned, Faisal, about working together. A lot of the candidates, I'm not sure if it's visible on the outside, but on the back end, we are all connecting. We are all having conversations. Okay, what is it going to look like when we all get into office? And so, Kenneth, can you talk a little bit about, what kind of things you're already doing to work with the candidates? How do you imagine, your role in the future working with candidates? And Faisal, you as well, because I think, and I'm not sure how, I don't know how to explain this, but running for office is one of the loneliest experiences that I've ever went through, even though there was many people around me. But what made it less lonely was having dinners with folks like Kenneth and Hugo and Aaron to really build together. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how y'all can imagine doing that once you're in office.
Yes, great question. Even now as a campaign, we have people who are running for city council, who asked us. I remember Councilmember like Hernandez, and you asked me about helicopter costs. Hugo is asking me about police and social services, providing breakdowns on that. But as you can see here, this collaboration it just comes so naturally for us, for people who really care. And I think as a city controller, as the person who has information at his disposal, I can come up with those numbers that people need. People need numbers, people need facts, people need data right away. They need it in a way that's accessible, in a way that's understandable. And I think that's how we can serve our counterparts in the council or in the mayor. In addition, as the city's auditor, imagine we do an audit and we find out something so big, right? We find out that there's mismanagement, or there's fraud, or there's something happening at a certain department. And I give those recommendations to our council members, because they're going to be the ones who take my recommendations or not, and they're going to implement systemic change. And I think that's what you can get with a controller who's proactive, who doesn't just release reports and recommendations and then just forgets about it, but who's always there constantly bringing that transparency and just reminding them, hey, we found this out during this audit. Has there been any update on the status or progress on implementing these changes? And I think that's a great way on how we can collaborate, especially on many of the issues y'all care about.
Thank you, Kenneth. Faisal, please take it away.
Yeah, again, building on what Kenneth just said, which is great. When council members want to take action based on what Kenneth has found, they're going to need legal advice, whether it's new ordinances that they want to pass, whether it's, they want to go after the fraud that's taking place, whatever is happening, they're going to want to know from the city attorney, look, how can I do it? And you could have a city attorney who says, oh, no, you can't do anything. That's it. Nothing is going to happen. Or you could have a city attorney that's going to prevent Kenneth from doing all the audits that he's trying to do, and really get to the heart of corruption and get to the heart of fraud or systemic change. So you need a city attorney who's going to, one, advise the council members and get their policy agenda through. And that's another thing. Every council member that's coming in, like you and hopefully, Hugo and Aaron, that'll be coming in as well. What they have, that you have a great agenda, people's agenda, and you're going to need the city attorney to basically advise you, okay, here's the ordinances that we can pass. The last thing you need is a city attorney coming up to you and saying, I'm sorry, you can't do this, you can't do this, that's not legal, and giving the council an excuse not to pass the ordinances that you want, which we all know they're going to be looking for excuses not to pass some of the, groundbreaking changes that we all want to do. So having that city attorney basically doing it is very important, as well as, again, taking the information that Kenneth's found and then taking actual action against it, whether it's going after landlords, whether it's, going after the, developers that are doing what's wrong. So we need to have a city attorney that can actually take action.
Yeah, I keep getting more excited to envision what it'll look like in January with y'all. And just to highlight last thing around the city attorney role, not only is this role in charge of prosecuting people, but also it is the pathway into letting the city council, giving the city council advice on, yes, you can do something, or no, you can't do something. And sometimes it's not even based on the law, but it's based on the lens and perspective that the people bring into that role. And so that's why it's important that we have people who can envision, who have imagination, who want to, move forward and progress from where we are, because it does really make a difference. So now I'm going to get into some questions around police accountability. Kenneth, you've used public record requests and accounting tools to calculate and map the city's exorbitant spending on LAPD as compared to other social services like public health. How will you continue this type of transparency and advocacy to pressure the city to hold LAPD accountable when you're in office?
Great question. As many of you know, I'm not shy or afraid to hold the most powerful department or organization in our city accountable. Number one, because from a financial perspective, they are very material in the sense that they get close to 30% of our entire budget, 3.2 billion this year. And I think people deserve to know, like, where is that money going, right? Like, what are they doing on a daily basis? How come, if we are increasing their budgets every year, how come crime is still up? Because there's this conception that if you increase budgets or decrease budget, that's the way crime will go the opposite. But, obviously it's not the case. And so, it's also important too, because the police, people trust them. And if there's no trust into a department that's supposed to protect you, and instead, they're causing harm, they're causing violence against communities of color, then that deserves to be known. And that information needs to be made transparent, because maybe, just maybe, there's something else that we can have for public safety besides traditional law enforcement. And so, for us, for our campaign, we've mapped out where LAPD spends most of their time stopping people. We made a whole map about that, even by race. And you can see that, Black people are stopped close to 30% of the time, even though they make up 9% of the population. And we also found out from that analysis too, that Black people are stopped the most, and yet the end result of that stop ends up with nothing happening to them. It's like they got stopped and they said, you're free to go, but the trauma is there. The trauma is there. And I think those are just important things that people need to know on what the police do. And if we're paying, does it make sense to pay a cop $135,000 a year if close to 80% of their time is traffic stops, right? And I guess these are those questions that we want to figure out. Are we getting the best bang for our buck? Are we getting safer? And, I promise you all, we're going to just keep putting information out there, keep putting it out in a way that's easy to understand, and holding them accountable, because I know for everyone, police is at like the top of the list as they want audited.
Thank you, Kenneth. And I think that's really important, because when we think about the budget, we are one of the richest cities in the world, but a significant chunk of our general funds and even other federal funds are going into law enforcement. I don't think any other moment in history have we given them more money than we do today, and people don't feel safe. So we need to really have those dollars audited. And Faisal, to you're the city attorney. You're going to be one of the mechanisms to hold LAPD accountable. But what does that actually look like? And could you give us some examples of that, please?
Absolutely. So the first and foremost, and I've always said, the city attorney's job is not to make sure that every department has proper legal advice. It certainly is that too, but it's also to make sure that every department is following the law. That is a critical role the city attorney plays. And to the extent that certain police officers in LAPD are not following the law by having pretextual stops or, just stopping Black people unnecessarily and resulting in nothing, that really matters. So from the city attorney's perspective, there are several things that I can do. One is proactive, which I will do as their legal advisor, getting in there and telling them what they can and cannot do in very strong terms, to easy to understand, unequivocal, what you can and can't do. I think that's the first and most basic. But moving past that, there are several others. One is there's a claim process. If a Black person is stopped, unnecessarily by the police, if there's excessive force used, wrongful arrest made, then that person deserves justice, and that person deserves justice very, very quickly for two reasons. One, they deserve justice, and second, the police needs to know that if they do something wrong, they're going to be held accountable. And that's one of the things that the city attorney can do. Instead of denying the claims, I'm going to give the people justice. That's one thing. Second is making sure that that officer is disciplined. We all know Derek Chauvin had, 17, 16, something crazy amount of, complaints against him, and yet he was still on the street. What do we expect is going to happen after this police officer has gotten all these complaints and nothing has happened against that person? So, Amy?
We can still hear you, Faisal. You're still here.
Oh,
You're
sorry,
still good.
sorry.
No, you're good.
I didn't know what happened. The screen
No,
went
you're
blank.
good.
Sorry about that. I'm a technical expert, my wife.
No, you're good. You're good.
Sorry about that. So, what do we think is going to happen? So I'm going to take action against the police officers by working within the LAPD disciplinary system and making sure that city attorneys are there. Right now, when they go through their board of rights, city attorneys are not there. It's sergeant and it's versus their lawyer. That to me makes absolutely no sense. And then another tool that is not used in this city attorney's office, but is used everywhere else that I know as a progressive prosecutor, is if there are cases that from a police officer who's had a history of police using excessive force or wrongful arrest, then the city attorney can decline to take referrals from that police officer and decline to prosecute any case that comes from that police officer. And I will absolutely use that because you can't be sure if the investigation was done correctly. So all those tools are at my disposal to get police accountability. But one thing is for certain, on day one, every LAPD officer is going to know one thing. If you use excessive force, if you racially profile, if you wrongfully arrest, I will be there to hold you accountable. If you don't, you have nothing to worry about from me. But if you do those things, I will be there like a ton of bricks to hold you responsible.
Thank you, Faisal. And I think that most of us can agree that that's not happening at all right now, at least not in LA. And so, January is hopefully going to be a new leaf, and we're all in there. But that brings me a lot of excitement that, there will be some accountability. There will be some justice for folks that right now, the harm that's happening to them by law enforcement is just being swept under the rug, and or we're paying millions upon millions of dollars from our general fund to fix, to address those mistakes. So thank you for that, team. I do want to, there's going to be time for Q&A, but I want us to dive into some of the housing and environmental questions, if that's okay, because we usually folks don't know how much actual power y'all have over some of these things. So I think it'd be important to highlight. Let's talk about 4118. So Kenneth, you made a map. It showed that nearly 50% of CD1 would be under the 4118 policy that they just passed. Before that, there were 4118 zones within this district, none of which work. We all know that it's just playing whack-a-mole with our tax dollars and people's lives. And so I was glad to see that both of you opposed, 4118 and the impact that it's having on, our community members. But can you tell voters what specifically you can and will do in your role as city attorney and controller to stop this practice? Faisal, you want to go ahead and start?
Absolutely. I've said from day one that 4118 is unconstitutional. Now in my role as city attorney, I know what my role is, and it's not the policy making. That's up to you, Eunisses and other members of the council. However, in my role as city council, I'm not going to allow some unconstitutional law to be passed. And 4118 is unconstitutional. And, further proof of that was the case that was just decided yesterday by the Ninth Circuit, further saying that 4118 is, unconstitutional. So what I've said is I am not going to arrest people, or I'm not going to enforce it, basically. If there is an arrest made and if it's brought to me, there's going to be no criminal charges filed against somebody who has no place to live and therefore is forced to be out on the sidewalk. It makes absolutely no sense. I will not let the criminal justice system be used to even try to solve homelessness, because it can't. Last time I checked, nobody goes to jail and comes out with a house. So therefore, there's no way, there's no reason to do it. Instead, what we need is services. And what I feel happens is that the city council, feels the pressure from the public to do something about housing, about homelessness. So what they do is they pass this tough on homelessness ordinance that has absolutely no chance of solving even 1/10 of the issue. It basically moves people from one place to another, and that's all it does. And if even if I was, and I would never do it, let's charge somebody. How long am I supposed to put them in jail? A day, 2 days, 3 days? What's going to happen after that? So it is absolutely unconstitutional. I've said I will not enforce it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Faisal. Kenneth, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, thank you, Faisal. And just to, be clear for all of us who oppose 4118, we don't want encampments anywhere. We don't want encampments near schools, churches, parks. We don't even want that to exist. But to cover it up with 4118 is just bad policy. When you create districts, it's like Hunger Games. Like literally, you're marking places off that are illegal to sit, lie, sleep, or be around, which is basically being homeless. And it makes it worse, because if you do get caught, or you do get a ticket, or if you do go to jail, you just end up worse than where you were before. And so we need to find a better way to do that. And I think what our campaign really wanted to show is that just the magnitude of what this will do. And we also could see too, from an audit perspective, that these 4118 zones that they're passing, it gives people this false sense of hope. Like it doesn't fix anything. Even the current 4118 zones right now aren't even being enforced. And so, it's not a good policy, and it's not even working. And I think as the city's auditor, we want to audit the city's policies that are passed by these council members to see like, hey, like, did this actually work? Did this actually do anything? Oh, it moved an encampment from here to the next block, but the child still has to walk past it. It didn't really do much, right? And so I think as controller, we just want to get down to it and see, where's the money? Can it be spent more on housing? Can it be spent more on services, on treatment? And I think that's why one of our main goals is to audit homelessness spending, to see if that 1.2 billion that we're going to spend this year is actually going to work and being put to use.
Thank you, Kenneth. And diving a little bit into more of like, what are the other things we could do? Faisal, how do you think you can use a position of city attorney to divert city funds away from criminalizing homelessness and towards developing meaningful support and resources? And I ask that because a lot of money goes into prosecuting. It goes into prosecuting these laws. And so what are the things, how can some savings happen if we're not, implementing some of these laws that are unconstitutional and are harmful?
Absolutely. Look, I've said from day one, what I want is, services. That's how we're going to solve this issue in homelessness. I mean, I agree with Kenneth. People ask me all the time, oh, you're not going to enforce it. Do you want encampments? And the question is not that we want encampments. Nobody wants encampments. Nobody wants somebody, sleeping outside. Nobody wants kids walking outside. We don't want that. The issue is we have to solve it, not just, again, as you said, play whack-a-mole with it. So a city attorney, I'm going to try to divert some of the funds that I've got into services where we can do services where we can, undo the harm that was done before by expunging people's records so they don't have a criminal record, so they can go in and get housing and get employment and get services that they otherwise would be stopped from getting, or divert them to those services, mental services that we need to do. As well as the other thing is advising council members and removing any and all legal impediments that exist for getting transitional housing, temporary housing, permanent housing, using vacant city lands to house people. I mean, that's what the city attorney needs to be doing, is basically making sure that the policy ideas that the council comes up with that actually solve the issues, don't run into any legal roadblocks. And then also using my resources to divert people to services and give them services instead of, a jail cell.
Thank you, Faisal. Kenneth, can you please talk to us a little bit about some of the materials that you've developed to help identify particularly the racial disparities and the impact of that, both through the enforcement of 4118 and some of these other policies?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, what you're seeing, as mentioned earlier, with enforcement policies, people who are Black are getting impacted the most, especially as it relates to homelessness. We also saw too, in this year's homelessness count, that the largest increase was in the Latinx community. And when enforcement hits, it's going to impact these communities who are already struggling to begin with. And so I think, as Faisal said, there has to be a better way where we can make our money work better, right? It's like, does it make sense to spend, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000 on a 3-hour sweep, right? Where it has 5 cops and it has 20 sanitation workers and it has 3 vehicles, and it's like, does it make sense to do that? Or, could we have just helped this person get an apartment for an entire year? And I think those are the questions, as someone who works with money, who looks at money and thinks like, oh, well, maybe I think that wasn't a good idea. Like, we spent over $1 million on the Echo Park suite, right? Like it's like, come on, like, why are we spending that much money on this? And it was mostly on police officers. And so, I think for us, we want to show those racial disparities on who these policies impact the most. And we also want to show alternatives as to which, in finance or in economics, you call it the opportunity cost. What could have been spent besides $1 million on police for this 3-day sweep? What could have that $1 million done for those 70 people who got evicted? And so, for us as controller too, just as a campaign, we put out resources besides our 4118 map to, that was mainly made for not only for analysis, but for those unhoused who do have phones, who can understand and navigate where they can be, where they can sleep or where they can live. But also we created a map too of the city's affordable housing stocks as well, just so people can apply for many of these units, because what the city has, their website is, it's not the best. And so hoping as city controller we could put more data out there and bring more transparency and accountability on how we solve homelessness.
Thank you, Kenneth. And just to take a quick step back, Kenneth and I went to Denver for a gathering of other electeds. And one of the things that we got to do was study the STAR program, which is an alternate type of mental health crisis response. And the cool thing is that being there, Kenneth was doing the fiscal analysis of it. Like, how much does it cost? What would it look like? I was on the policy side of it. And, we could have had, if Faisal was there, he could have been thinking about, okay, what is the criteria or series of I'll say, different penal codes that we can add in there for diversion. And so this is like our examples of like how we can work together and why we need really strong people to advance the things that we should have been implementing years ago. As a city, we are not as progressive as we'd like to think, and going to these other jurisdictions and studying these other programs, it's kind of embarrassing to go there and to feel like, damn, we are so far behind on some of these basic implementation of some of these programs. So I just want to uplift that was an eye opener, and I can imagine us all 3 working together, trying to do things like that locally. I'm going to get us now into environmental questions. Environmental racism impacts the entire city, some districts more than others. We have certain districts within the city that have hundreds of uncapped oil wells that are just leaking oil or leaking toxic fumes. We have development going on there. We have a lot of toxic land within the city of LA, a lot in CD1. And so the environment is really important, both in like the housing that gets built, but also in the remediation and the cleanup and how we move forward. And so bringing a consumer rights action against, for example, an employer who is violating minimum wage and workplace protection, or landlords abusing tenants, involves a great deal of investigation. Faisal, and then I'll pass it to Kenneth, but how can your offices work together to identify bad actors operating within the city and to build a strong case to protect tenants, employees, and consumers.
So that's going to be, I think, one of the big areas that I'm very excited about working with Kenneth on, because, Kenneth can, the investigation and the audits and everything that he can do and does will give us great evidence to then take forward. And when we have our affirmative litigation department, which I'm really going to basically put on steroids, really put a lot of resources in that department to go after, employers who are harming, go after the oil companies that have left the oil wells uncapped, make sure that they're doing remediation. We all know they're not going to do it, voluntarily and because they're good corporate citizens. They're going to have to be forced to it. So getting the information from Kenneth is going to be key and instrumental, and we're going to work hand in hand in making sure that we can take action after Kenneth identifies all the information, as well as, I want to build that capacity in the city attorney's office. I mean, what's amazing to me is that the capacity, a lot of the investigation capacity does not exist in the city attorney's office, So I want to do that. I want to build that in the city attorney's office as well, learn from Kenneth and say, okay, look, how can we have that inside the city attorney's office so we can then investigate and then we can go after it.
Yeah. And to, like what Ron Galperin did, he actually created like a map and an analysis of oil wells, throughout the city of LA. There are about 5,000 of them, and a little more than 3,000 are plugged, 900 are buried, 800 are still active, and 300 are idle. As you can see, there are a few thousand that are still uncapped. And what you end up seeing with these uncapped wells or these oil companies who know their time's coming is they'll just go bankrupt and they'll dip, right? And the cost of cleaning up these wells, these oil wells, and what we notice as well, and many people notice too, like around here near Vista Hermosa, near Echo Park, near Wilmington, is that all these oil wells are in communities of color, right? But on the financial side, it could cost like up to $500,000 to clean up a well. Right. And so for if you're looking at like taxpayer dollars, it could be close to like $500 million for us in LA to clean up these wells. But but most importantly though, on the health side too, people, when we organize for tenants like around Vista Hermosa or around here, people are suffering, right? Asthma, nosebleeds. You go in historic Filipino town, you'll literally see like an oil well like in someone's backyard, and it's like, why does that even exist? And I think as city controller too, we want to make sure that our promises to go green, to implement the Green New Deal, are hitting those deadlines, are being promoted and being transparent on if we're hitting these milestones or not. Because right now not a lot of people know, and so environmental justice is going to be huge, and we're excited to work with the council and with the city attorneys that they can take our data and hold those of power accountable.
That's very exciting what you just mentioned, Kenneth, the implementation of things, right? So much policy has passed through City Hall. I'm sure many that you all have worked on. The press releases come out, the press conference happens, but the implementation doesn't happen. And so, having folks that can envision doing the work of implementation is so critical, because community can't do it all by itself. It can't implement all the laws. And so thank you, Kenneth, for mentioning that. And I want to go to Faisal. Mayor Garcetti, this current city council, they've all made really big statements about the Green New Deal. They've appointed a forestry officer that wants to plant more trees. But we can all see that shade is still inequitable. Most of our elementary schools don't have shade. They're, concrete jungles, especially in our poor neighborhoods. But how will you use your office to actually move the needle on climate change and uplifting our environmental equity?
Yeah. But look, you just saw, I think it was today, that you saw Cal State students walk out of their classrooms because it was so hot and the ventilation was so poor. So there's a lot of issues that are going on that we need to do. Look, the number one thing the city attorney can do is go after these corporate polluters, right? That's as you said, implementation is weak. And why is implementation weak? Because you've got very big business interests at play here. And very big business interests are not going to go quietly, whether it's remediation, whether it's, really taking bold steps. And as city attorney, I've got two offices, the environmental justice unit, which I'm gonna, again, get the right personnel there who can aggressively go after the polluters, and the affirmative litigation department that can again go after, proactively and affirmatively go after corporate polluters. I'm going to do that for both. I'm going to look to see where the inequities are, and are all the environmental laws being followed? And I would be willing to bet you just about anything. No. Are all the ordinances being followed that Los Angeles already passes on environment? And the answer is probably not. I mean, there's so many ordinances that are passed that are just go unenforced. So as city attorney, I can look at all the environmental ordinances we've passed, make sure we pass them, and advise the city council that, hey, look, these are commitments that you have made. This is law. If the city council has said we're going to do X, Y, and Z, then we want to make sure the city council is doing X, Y, and Z, because you have a legal obligation to do X, Y, and Z and allocate the funds towards it, and not just, just have a good press conference and then absolutely do nothing. But I am going to take all those actions. But the biggest thing I can do is enforce all the ordinances that are there and then go after the corporate polluters.
Thank you, Faisal. Kenneth, would you like to add a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, like what you mentioned earlier about tree shade and tree canopies throughout the city, how we said in the Green New Deal we're going to plant 90,000 trees by 2021, and it's like, nope. But I think that's why you need a city controller who could keep up the pressure. Like one of the great things that I can envision when we win is that we're going to have websites with timelines, and we're going to show the city's promises and their goals and what they said they're going to do. And then we're going to show like, nope, it did not get hit. We're going to have ways how you can contact your council member to like, hey, we're not even close to it. Like, what happened? But that's essentially what we need. Because if you don't hit your goals, remember, people who suffer the most from the city's inaction, whether it's the Green New Deal, whether it's Vision Zero, whether it's all of these promises they make, are people of color, Black and brown, and people with less money. And so, we need a controller who is about equity, who is about justice, and who understands numbers and can make technology and put it out there in a way that can, aid our attorney, city attorney, and our council members, and then hopefully, the people. Because at the end of the day, I can put out all these great things, but if no one wants to implement it, then I'll need the people support to push the council members. So yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Faisal. So I want to just do a quick time check for us. We have about 10 minutes. We're going to save a few minutes at the end because there's some call to actions. We are a few, I don't even know, is it like 2 weeks or less than like 10 days until ballots start dropping? So there's next steps from here. I'd like to do one more question that we have, and then please, if you have any questions, put it in the chat. Thank you, Godfrey. 12 days until ballots drop. So this one's about corruption. The city has been no stranger to corruption, with several council members and several department heads being indicted for corruption. And it's led to direct costs to us, the taxpayers, especially around things like the LAPD billing scandal. Faisal, what will you do to ensure the city does not foot the bill for government employees' misconduct?
Well, look, corruption is one of the biggest things that I'm going after. To the extent that the city doesn't have to foot the bill, I will find every legal way for the city not to foot the bill. To the extent that it has to, but I will root corruption out. And the biggest way you can root corruption out is by city attorney being very active and very visible in the departments and in City Hall. And I will be very visible in the departments and in City Hall to make sure that whether it's development that's going on, whether it's a raid scandal, whatever it is, we're there. And again, depending on, and this is where Kenneth and I, again, will be working very closely together, because the audits that he's doing set out red flags. Can they set out red flags? But most of the time, nobody either looks at them or nobody, pays attention to them. But, I bet you, I have no doubt that if Kenneth was city controller when the DWP scandal took place, Kenneth would have had an audit right there that would have set out tons of red flags, where we, as city attorney and others, could have, swooped in and tried to correct that. But no, nothing happened. So those are very important. But the visibility, making sure that all the ordinances and all the laws are being followed, and especially the way we have development, that's the biggest issue, right? We want to make sure that all the development is done correctly, all the development is done following all the laws. And I'm not afraid to hold city officials accountable. I'm not afraid to go after city officials. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest difference is going to happen. Is there are several ways I can do it. I have the ability to prosecute, but if it's serious, I have the ability to refer to DA Gascon or the U.S. Attorney's Office. Make sure that we have a strong investigation where we have a tight case. Also, to stop the actual act of the corruption. People always forget that. There's always, okay, we're going to go ahead and prosecute, which is great. You want to hold the person accountable, but you also want to make sure that the act that's going on doesn't get worse and worse. Again, billing scandal is a big thing. We could have caught it in the beginning and not had it progress, but we didn't do that. So those are the things that I'm going to do.
Thank you, Faisal. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up about the LADWP scandal. The city ended up paying $30 million to a sham IT security company and to fix our billing issue, our billing system, because consumers like you were paying a lot of money for power and water. And what did we find out is that this company was fake. And it was a no bid contract. And talking about no bids, we want to create, when we win, a database of all no bid contracts, essentially, so people know where their money is being spent, who we're contracting with, and why, and who approved it as well. I think you'll learn a lot, and I think it's better for transparency's sake. So people and taxpayers and voters can see, why did we spend $30 million on this company if they have no history or anything? And in addition to, when you have corruption like this scandal, because I think the general manager was also involved too. The city attorney, they like knew about some of these arrangements, and it just shows that negligence by our city attorney, by those in power who could have caught this, who could have audited it, and stopped this from happening. And so I think for us, we want to end this cycle of corruption, of status quo politicians who are, or people who are running backed by the typical establishment, because we know where their policies and their legacy has gotten us. And so I hope we do that when we win in November.
Damn, $30 million. When we have 41,000 people experiencing homelessness on our streets, people keep telling me, like, what do we do? We're one of the richest cities in the world, y'all. We could be solving these issues if we had the appropriate people watching the dollars, deciding what to do with them. There's a lot of great questions that have been submitted. We have some limited time, but I do want to go through them. And the first one, and Kenneth, can we start with you? What are some of the biggest differences between you and your opponent? And then Faisal, go to you.
Great question. My opponent is City Council Member Paul Koretz. He's been in politics for over 34 years, older than me. And I think one of the biggest differences that we have is that the position is very technical. It's literally the city's accountant and auditor. So number one, I come in with accounting and auditing experience. He doesn't. I come in also as an outsider. The city controller is supposed to be the independent watchdog. And it's going to be hard to hold general managers accountable, council accountable, the mayor accountable, if these are people you've worked with your entire life. And so, that's one of the big reasons why, like, the LA Times endorsed us, right? It's because we can use the bully pulpit for good, and to actually hold these people who handle our tax dollars accountable. Because like Eunisses, what you said is, we are one of the richest cities. We have one of the largest budgets. It's not that we don't have enough money; it's that we're not spending it correctly. And I think, as someone who has this background, I can provide those details, that analysis, and that oversight. Whereas it'll be more difficult for my opponent. And the last big difference is we're already doing the job of city controller. We created resources. We created tools. We provide so much transparency. We're putting out billboards of information that people should care about. And we're out there connecting and educating the community about this position. So yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth. Faisal, please tell us what are some of the biggest differences between you and your opponent?
Yeah, so there's quite a few. I would say the two big categories are experience and vision, right? Let's go to experience first. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I go to court on a regular basis. A large part of the city attorney job is knowing court, whether in the civil litigation side, affirmative litigation side, as we've talked about. Almost every question here has involved the city attorney in some way, shape, or form going to court. My opponent has no idea how to do that. Has never tried a case. And so I think that's a very big thing, especially if we're going to try to accomplish big things. You need somebody who is very experienced in the courtroom. My opponent is not. The next is philosophy, right? My opponent does not believe that city attorney office can do anything about corruption. I think that's a major difference, and that just boggles my mind. I believe that the city attorney, that's one of the main jobs, to make sure that there's no corruption in there. My opponent also believes that the city attorney should just basically be there and just do whatever council and the mayor want. I mean, there's no way to have accountability if that's the role, if that's the mindset the person that the city attorney is going to come in with, is that, hey, I'm just there to, just do what the city council wants and what the mayor wants. And again, you're going to have zero accountability if that's the case. And then my opponent does not want to really do anything. She doesn't affirmative litigation. She's never taken a position on that. 4118, when asked about 4118, her thing was, well, I'm going to talk to my client and then give advice. Well, no, the job of the attorney is to go to the city council and say, hey, this is illegal. You can't do this. You don't talk to the client and say, what do you want to do? Yeah, this is illegal. No, that makes absolutely no sense. So vision and experience, those are the two really big differences between me and my opponent.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. There's a series of questions that are in the chat. I've screenshot all of them, and I'm going to text them to Faisal and Kenneth. So hopefully through Twitter threads or through social media, you all can communicate the answers to these questions, because some of them are really good. I just want to thank you all for, letting me participate in this conversation. And I'm going to pass it to the team that organized this gathering to give you some next steps, because there's 12 days till November, or till ballots drop, not November 8th. Oh goodness, no, till ballots drop. And so we need to keep hitting the ground hard. We need to get these folks in. We just cannot afford not to have these people in these positions, because the next 4 years, that's 4 budget cycles. That's 4 legislative cycles at the city level. We're trying to get to the majority of 8. Kenneth and Faisal, both as city attorney and as city controller, have so much power and influence on what we're able to accomplish as a city council. Literally between one word, the protection of having tenants access like tenant protections, or not being able to access that, just through one word. That's how much power some of these roles have. So please tell your people to vote. Tell your people to vote for some of these candidates. I'm going to now pass it to the team so y'all can tell folks what are some of these next steps to help get these folks across the finish line.
Thank you so much, Eunisses. Well, first of all, congratulations for being already part of the team who will be bringing our city into a direction that we can be more proud of, where every single Angelino can flourish and thrive with their lives. And we are excited to make sure that Faisal and Kenneth join you in City Hall when you all get sworn in December. But first, we need to make sure that these two folks win. And so on your screen and in the chat box, sorry, yeah, people cannot see you. Okay, on the screen and in the chat box, you see a link to sign up for a joint canvass that both campaigns are holding this Sunday in Sherman Oaks. You see it is at 3 p.m. So you can go do your Sunday brunch, do a little Sunday fun day, then go bring the fun out to the Valley and knock on doors. What's really important is, as you all heard all call long, these are two positions that are so little known. And what we know about voters who are going to come out is that sometimes they'll vote for the things they know about. And if they get scared that they don't know what a city attorney really does, what a controller really does, they will skip over these particular ballot items, and we don't want them to do that. So it is incredibly important that we as volunteers and activists go out to doors and make sure folks get exposed to these two positions and these two candidates in particular. And so you can see again, you can click on that link, tinyurl.com/Kenneth-Faisal. And then, follow both of these folks on social media, because there are many more calls to action than this particular October 3rd canvas. If you haven't donated yet, what we know is true is that it takes money to be able to leave all of these various flyers at the door, mailers, like just all of the things that people get in order to know who they vote for. And then lastly, I think Amy said this earlier today, ballots theoretically drop by October 10th. So what we know is true in the primary is that ballots began dropping even earlier, right? Like the Thursday before, the Friday before, whatever that first Monday is of the voting period. And so that's why this particular canvas is extremely important. Folks who are likely to vote, many of them will vote within the first week or so that they get the ballot, because they are ready to go. So this is our last call for action. We're going to be doing last calls for action all through October and November, but for now, this is our last call to action before this particular mail-in ballot season begins. Amy says, anything else, or Tony or others of our candidates, any final words before we end today?
We can't do anything by ourselves, so we need these folks in there, please. 12 days, phone bank, door knock, donate, whatever it is you can. It's people power that are going to win this. So every single person counts. Hit up all your friends, TikTok. We're trying to get Faisal out there. Everybody, we need these folks in. So just please tap in, whatever your capacity or whatever your lane is. Even if you're an artist, making art about these candidates, about their vision, is also a really good way to share who they are. Thank you, team. Thanks for being with us and for getting politically engaged on a Thursday evening.
Thanks y'all so much. Sign up to Canvas. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Abundant Housing LA, the LA City Council Coalition for organizing this, LA Forward, and the many others who made today possible. Kenneth and Faisal, we got your back. Thank you, Eunisses, and have a good night, y'all. All right.
Do you need anything from me? Can I leave? I removed everybody else.
Yeah.
Eunisses,
I think
you were so good. So good. Thank you so much for doing this. That was just so
not having
incredible.
a run of show. You're like, what's happening? Go. Thank you so much for making it happen.
Yeah.
No, cool. This was really good. I hope, I really want them to win. So anything I can do, you let me know.
Awesome.
Have a great night.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good. I'll send the recording out, Tony. Okay. Thanks.
That sounds great.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.